Notre Dame fans, welcome to a special edition of the Irish Breakdown Podcast. My name is Brian Driscoll, as you can see right there, joined today by Ryan Roberts, our recruiting director at irishbreakdown.com, and we are here today to cover the pending commitment of Preston Zinter to somebody, whether it's going to be Notre Dame, Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State. He's got a very impressive offer list, Ryan. He is going to make his decision known today. And we're going to have a lot to say about it one way or the other. If he picks Notre Dame, we'll discuss why. We'll discuss the backstory, how he fits, all those kind of things. And if he doesn't pick Notre Dame, we'll talk about kind of what's next at linebacker. So we'll have all those things. And, of course, he is going to be making a live announcement here very soon. When he starts to go to that, we will go live to it as well. So be ready for that. And then after he makes his announcements, we'll dive into it. But this is an interesting one, Ryan, because – and we'll just kind of lead up until they start talking about it. But this is actually looks like they're kind of getting ready to go to it. So let's pull that up. Everybody let me know. Let me turn the sound on here. And y'all let me know if you can hear.
215 pounds is a four-star.
Can everybody hear that?
He plays out of Central Catholic, according to our partners at 24/7 Sports. In terms of his statistics, Zinter is ranked at number 329 overall in America per the composite rankings. Zinter is listed as an athlete.
Can everybody hear that?
His size and skill is projected to play linebacker at the next level, but could play at a variety of positions. Listed as an athlete, he's the number 27 overall due to his impressive abilities on both sides of the ball. He's the number 4 ranked prospect in Massachusetts for this cycle. And we're now happy to welcome in Preston Zinter as he gets set to announce where he will play his college football. Welcome to CBS Sports HQ, Preston. How are you feeling today?
I'm feeling great. Thank you for having me.
Okay, so you had over 20 scholarship offers from some of the biggest schools in college football, a lot of big schools in the Big Ten, as it turns out. How difficult was this decision for you?
It was definitely great to make the decision, but at the end of the day, you can only go to one school. So, I had a ton of great opportunities and kind of a ton of great places where I could have gone. Very difficult decision to make at the end of the day, but I'm happy with where I'm going to go.
There with your sister and your parents. When assessing all these schools and these programs, Preston, what were the factors that you were looking at specifically?
Just big time football, great academics, really great sense of brotherhood within the team, and just somewhere where I can just grow as a person, then just grow on and off the field as well.
And certainly getting some experience as to what it is like. Your brother is a starter on the offensive line at Michigan, so you know about this process, having seen him go through it. How did that prepare you for this decision?
It definitely helped seeing my brother go through it. He gave me a lot of great tips and pointers of what I should and shouldn't do. So, it's great to have that person to look up to.
And I guess that's your brother down there on the bottom left on FaceTime joining us. So he's part of this too. The whole family's in on it. Preston, in reading about the reports about your game, the same adjectives all come up. Physical, athletic, tough. How do you classify your game?
I think you just said it all right there. I have a great work ethic, great leadership. So, every down I'm going 110% and never going to quit.
Is there a guy at the next level that you look up to or try to emulate other than your brother?
I would say
oh, we lost you there. We lost you. Lost your audio there, but
he did answer your question.
You're on mute, Brian. I know. I was so disappointed.
So I'm sitting there thinking, what did I do wrong?
I was like, did his iPad die or something? What's happening?
I know, right? I thought I did something wrong. I said, "Oh crap! Did I turn the sound off?" So we'll take that down. We'll go back to that here in a second. Obviously, this is an interesting one because he was kind of on the radar. He was a guy the staff liked. He was a guy that they had offered a while ago. They offered him back in the fall, I believe. And he was just one of several guys, and they're obviously offered Ryan, they went through a stretch where it's like you were doing a new offer story every day, it seemed,
at linebacker too,
exactly. Yeah. And then he visits for the January 29th date, and for whatever reason, so something happened during that time that when he left that, Notre Dame had immediately said, okay, we're not taking this kid, and that's the kid we want. So clearly, right, he showed up bigger than they thought or longer than the last time they saw him, or something changed. They had a chance to really dive into the junior film and realize, look, this is a kid that we want, and they pushed for him. Now, obviously we'll see kind of, what decision he makes, but it is interesting to see kind of how that changed, because it looked like they were going to be real patient at linebacker. And then after that, Notre Dame was kind of like, we're going to ramp it up, because it what also comes out is, Phil Picciotti, who I know the staff likes a lot. Somebody down there said, the staff cooled on Phil Picciotti. No, they didn't. This is more about them heating up on Preston Zinter. Now, obviously how things go today is going to determine what's going on. And I thought we would already have the decision by now, but technical difficulty. See, it's not just us. It's not just me that has technical difficulties, but this one heated up real quick, Ryan.
It did. No, it escalated very quickly. I know, people kept asking, like, who's the next potential commit, right? And we were kind of putting some names out there. And, the last time I talked to Preston, it was kind of like, I'm going to take my time with this. Because he was, last time we spoke a couple weeks ago, it was at the point where he was just like, man, like last 2 weeks, I've had 20 schools come in and out of Central Catholic. He felt a little overwhelmed. Obviously, he was getting ready for the junior day visit. He went on the junior day visit. That went fantastic. And like you said, for whatever reason, at that point, it was kind of like, okay, this is the guy for Notre Dame that they're going to make a big push, and we'll see if they can finish it off here. But it's a really interesting conversation too, Brian. I know we'll get more into like the position stuff if he does decide to come to Notre Dame and where he would fit there. But I mean, just from a recruiting standpoint, this is a young man that's been recruited as a tight end by some programs, on defense at linebacker. And I wouldn't be surprised if some schools maybe even kick the tires with him playing, weak side defensive end. Like, I think that he can do that because he does that for his school already. They play like a 3-4 system where he's basically, an on-ball linebacker a ton. So, I mean, you could project him to so many different spots. And I think that's the fascinating thing about his recruitment, is that there was a lot of schools that had different perspectives on him, different projections for him, and had maybe different outlooks for what he could be for their school, which I think makes it interesting.
And it's so clear that for years, and it seems to be really amping up with Marcus Freeman. And we saw here we go. All right, let's get back to this. So let's see if it works this time.
Schools would love to have him. We'll find out the decision next on HQ.
They drag this stuff out. So they're now going to commercials. So they couldn't have done that while he was
having technical difficulties. Yeah,
man, come on now.
It's pretty cool, man. That the age of technology, though, it is pretty neat that he was able to have Zach, his brother, the starting offensive line for Michigan, be able to FaceTime during it too, though, man. That's pretty neat.
No doubt. Yeah, no doubt. You talk about him being a potential edge player is what we were discussing too, and then we kind of got into sort of a bit of a different kind of a different topic that kind of fits him is the one thing that's unique about him and about what we've seen from recruiting at Notre Dame for several years now. And this is something that Brian Kelly was into that I think has really ramped up in recent years, especially this past year with Marcus Freeman, is a lot of the kids that played for Notre Dame that Notre Dame recruited on defense last year were two-way players. Right. You look at Jalen Sneed played quarterback, and you look at Josh Burnham played quarterback. Nolan Ziegler played receiver. You look at Benjamin Morrison was a two-way player. Jaden Mickey was not, because he comes from an area where it's just you don't have as many of the two-way guys. Jaden Bellamy was a two-way player, and obviously it's a situation where this is a kid that fits that mold, right? This is just a football player, right? And that's kind of what Notre Dame was looking for, and he kind of fits that mold. So that part of it kind of understands, because like you said, it's not just about he plays two ways, but this is a kid that could play both sides of the ball in college to some degree. Yeah. Now, I think defense is where his best position is, but there's no doubt that he could help at that other position, in my opinion.
Right. Well, and I think that the flexibility from even the recruit in the 2023 class of the commits that Notre Dame has so far, you talk about, Drake Bowen's obviously not going to play running back on the next level, but he's a damn good high school running back, right? And Cooper Flanagan, who we just broke down, was playing defensive end and tight end for De La Salle. So I think it kind of extends to the sense of, when you're the best athlete or wherever you are, you excel at everything. That's why I always love multi-sport athletes. They're always kind of the best of what they do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we were getting into an era that I didn't like, to be completely honest with you, of more and more specialists.
Mhm.
And I don't love that. I really don't. I think it's important to have guys that play football, because I think there's things that you learn, and we're seeing more and more of that from them. So, hey, Ryan, you don't happen to have a second monitor, by the way, do you? Because we're
No,
having there's some looks like there's some technical difficulties with CBS Sports right now that
oh no.
it's a little behind. So I was going to see if it might just be me or what the situation is, but it keeps freezing up. Everything else that I have going on is working fine, it seems,
Okay.
but for whatever reason, that one is not working fine. So, yeah, we're gonna have to find out kind of how that goes. But I want to address something real quick that was in the chat that's off of this as we kind of wait for this. First of all, we are not going to have a mailbag stream. When we are done talking about Preston, we are going to then just go into the mailbag. So keep it in mind, everybody. David Solomon says, he is in Notre Dame, haven't had a defensive lineman like Bryant Young in a long time. We need to take a D tackle of his caliber every year. Bryant Young's a Hall of Famer and a legendary player. Nobody signs a guy of his caliber every year. I mean, there's not a D tackle of his caliber in college football right now. I mean, he's a Hall of Famer. I mean, look, I think improving defensive line recruiting can always continue, but I think if that's your bar, you're going to be sadly disappointed with Notre Dame's recruiting classes for the rest of eternity, because I don't know if I've ever saw Notre Dame pick up a kid where I'm like, that guy's going to be a Hall of Famer. I mean, that's a really far down projection, but that's why Hall of Famers are what they are, right? Like, say, well, we need to go find ourselves an Aaron Donald. So was 31 NFL football teams.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, there isn't anybody like Aaron Donald. That's what makes Aaron Donald Aaron Donald. So, yeah, just kind of try to keep that in mind.
Yeah. I mean, you put in a couple names in the chat, I think, earlier, right? Like, I mean, Notre Dame has still had Stephon Tuitt and Jerry Tillery.
Somebody else
still
put that
pretty
in there.
good. You know?
Yeah, I mean, Jerry Tiller's a first-round NFL draft pick. I mean, so here we go. All right, let's get it. He's committed to Notre Dame. For whatever reason, the stream was not working, but you could hear the audio. So he did commit to Notre Dame. Preston Zinter has committed to the University of Notre Dame. He is now a commitment. Ryan, go ahead and talk about Preston Zinter's game.
Yeah. So, like I was kind of illustrating before we started, so in the system that he plays in a 3-4 where they put him as an outside linebacker and they let him rush a lot. They play him in space a ton for Notre Dame, and he's also recruited heavily as a tight end on the other side of the ball by a few programs. For Notre Dame, they like him as a Mike linebacker and even possibly maybe a Will potentially. But they like him at Mike because they think that he brings a lot of physicality. He has the length. He's 6'3". He looks like he has pretty good arm length. He is a good athlete overall. And he's, again, he's one of those guys that can kind of do a bunch of different things. And when I talked to his coach, Chuck Apolopoulos, who has been there for 38 years, and we'll have an article about kind of that conversation with Coach here pretty soon. He talked a lot about not only the character of the young man, but just the fact that he thinks that he can do so much on the next level. Like I was talking to him about, Notre Dame likes him at Mike, likes him potentially at Will as well. And he's like, yeah, he could play defensive end. He could play tight end. Like, he can do a little bit of everything. So Notre Dame does like him at Mike because he brings that physicality, he brings that length, good athlete. And then maybe potentially Will, depending on how everything shakes out. So he is a very talented football player. I'm excited to get him for Notre Dame to get him a part of this class with Drake Bowen, because I think when we talk about that fit, I think that those guys fit really well together as well. So good get for Notre Dame.
I'm just impressed that you could say that coach's name that easily. I mean, that just kind of rolled off like, I mean, wow, that was impressive, Ryan. I kind of stopped paying attention to your analysis after that. Like, man, it just nailed that. So
Adamopoulos, man, it's a good name.
He is, and let's give a little backstory to this. We kind of got into it a little bit at the beginning. Is, I think this is an interesting recruitment, because this is not a guy that I think a month ago the Notre Dame staff would have thought, yeah, we're gonna make a really hard push for this kid. I think they were still sorting out their board, And there's still a lot of guys they like. I think they're going to take they want to take at least 3 linebackers in this class. They'll take a 4th if it's a guy that can play, like legitimately play multiple positions. I don't think Zinter would count as that guy. I'm talking about a guy that could play rover, could play safety, or a guy that could play rover or linebacker and defensive end. I mean, a genuine 2-way player, or or a Ronan Hanfin guy.
Yeah.
But but what I liked about it though was they made a move on him for some reason, right? And so when the reports came out from other sources, I think it was Tom Loy reported that Notre Dame was cooling on Phil Picciotti. I kind of reached out to my sources and said, hey, what happened is, do you not like this kid? And they're like, no, we still love him. And basically you kind of get into this is more about Preston Zinter than it is about Phil Picciotti or anybody else. It's this kid has really impressed us with what he's done. I think you saw, if you go to the front page of irishbreakdown.com, because like Ryan, you and I were talking about when we watched this film, like, he looks about 6'1.5", 6'2", maybe on junior film, not real long.
Yeah.
Then you see a picture of him at Notre Dame with Marcus Freeman, and he's at least a good 1.5 taller than Marcus Freeman.
And Marcus Freeman was like 6'1".
He's 6'1.5". Yeah. I mean, I've had a chance to meet Coach Freeman, and I'm 6 foot. He's at least an inch taller than I am, and so you're like, so this kid hit a spurt, and I think that was one of the things that was sort of that final push for Notre Dame. Like, okay, some of the things that we liked certain things about him, but maybe there's some other guys that fit in a body profile a little bit better. Once he checked that box off, it was kind of like, okay, it's time this is a kid that you want to have. So it was really interesting how this whole thing changed. Because as you said, what we were hearing from Notre Dame from my sources at Notre Dame was, we're not in a hurry to go with anybody. We're not in a hurry to fill this linebacker class out. We're going to be lower on, we can be lower on numbers if we need to be. We can take our time, shoot for big fish, that kind of thing. And then like 2 weeks later, Preston Zinter's in the class, right? Who 2 weeks ago, maybe, people didn't think he would be that kind of guy. And then from your conversations with him, it didn't seem like he was in a hurry. So whatever happened during that visit, I think him and Drake Bowen kind of clicked. I think he got along well with the commits like Brendan Vernon and Drake Bowen. But both sides on this realize, like, dude, this has got to happen. We've got to we want you want us. Let's make this thing happen.
Yeah. Now, when I spoke to him, I was much more convinced that this was going to kind of be a summer deal, right? Like before the season, because I thought he was going to take more visits. It sounded like, because like I told everybody at the beginning, if you missed it, the 2 weeks prior to the junior day visit, 20 plus schools had been into Central Catholic to talk to him, and he was overwhelmed. He was like, I'm just trying to sort everything out right now. Like, there's a lot of schools that have kind of shown me interest. And then I know that obviously a lot of people probably speculated at some points that, like, his brother plays at Michigan, right? He's got a Michigan offer. That's got to be something that stuck. But when I talked to Coach Adamopoulos, and again, that's going to kind of be in the article that's going to be out here soon on Irish Breakdown, just kind of the insight into the coach's side of the recruiting. Michigan never had an inside track. Preston always wanted to do his own thing. He always wanted to make his own mark. He wasn't trying to just, make the Zinter pipeline to Michigan. He wanted to go where fit best for him. And that junior day, I guess, it obviously sealed the deal for him.
Well, let's not forget too that I know you haven't forgotten this, Ryan, but I want to remind everybody else: if Notre Dame if Zach Zinter would have been a take for Notre Dame, he would have picked Notre Dame. He wanted Notre Dame. I mean, this is a family that he would have chosen Notre Dame in 2019, which you could look back and say, boy, that was a mistake, because they ended up with 2 offensive linemen in that class. Tosh Baker and Michael Carmody came up short on numbers because they tried to be real picky, and then lost on all their top guys, and then decided to, move on Michael Carmody late. They could have still had Zach Zinter at that time and taken both him and Michael Carmody, but for whatever reason, the staff decided not to. And it's worked out for him, because he went to Michigan and was a starter on a team that won the Joe Moore Award for Michigan this year.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, and he started, I believe, every game at right guard, and he's a good football player, obviously. And, I think the exciting part, too, is that, his brother is a 6'6", 320-plus pound offensive guard, right? I mean, we're already talking about Preston at junior in high school, that's 6'3". Could he have another growth spurt ready, Could he maybe get another inch or so? And I know someone put in the chat, I think, that said, no more 6 foot short. Here it is. No more 6 foot short-armed linebackers, right? That's not Preston Zinter. He has that length and he has that growth potential.
And if you're going to take a guy like that, right, 6 foot short-armed linebacker, he better have something special. He better be like a 4.48 or a 4.51 kind of runner. He better be like Jaden Osbury is kind of a 6 foot, not real long linebacker. I'm taking him because he's a freak,
Yeah.
But if he's not that, then you shouldn't take him. And I think that's something we've seen from Marcus Freeman is length is a premium. Like Jalen Snead's not that tall. Jalen's only about 6'1.5", but he's long.
Yes,
he's very long. And I think that's something that clearly that Notre Dame was looking for. We do have a couple we have a super sticker from Ali Muhammad. Thank you, Ali, for that. Haven't seen you in the chat in a while. Glad to have you back with us. Brandon Plensender says this. I think this is an interesting take. Brandon says, I like Picciotti more, but I think the staff wants Zinter now. The reason I think why the staff wants Zinter now is his versatility. Notre Dame got a thumper inside linebacker last cycle and now a more athletic, versatile inside linebacker. I think there's something to that, Brandon. I think so too. Picciotti is more of a pure Mike. I
Downhill
think to his point, where Zinter is a Mike, they project him as a Mike, but there's some will potential there, where with Picciotti, he's just a Mike. Well, the problem is Junior Tuihalamaka is pretty much just a Mike. You can't fill up on too many just Mikes. Like we've talked about from an assignment standpoint, Mike and Will are interchangeable. But from a skill set standpoint, there can be differences. You can play Mike but not be able to play Will because you're not great in coverage and you're not quite as rangy. If you can play Will, you can play Mike. In most instances, it's not always the other way around. And so just so people understand what we mean by that. But we're going to dive into some film here too, Ryan. I want to get into a little bit of film here. About this young man. I think he is like I said, I like this kid. I think his national ranking, I think Rivals has him at number 214. I think 3 of the 4 major services have him as a 4-star. To me, he is that top 250 caliber guy. He is not a guy that I'm right now I have as like a top 100 recruit, but he's a guy that I definitely view as a, this is a guy that you look at and say, this is a good football player now, with a ceiling to be even better potentially. Now, the problem with ceiling guys is they don't always pan out, right? Sure. There's always a little bit more work to do with those kind of guys, but that's what Notre Dame is banking on. And I think before we dive into the film too, I think that's something that we're definitely seeing a lot more with Marcus Freeman. I feel like with Brian Kelly and his staff, they focused a lot more on the floor, with the exception of maybe D-line, because I thought Mike Elson was really good at finding upside guys. But at a lot of positions, they looked at the floor. And, hey, this is a smart kid. He's heady. He's at least going to be Drew White. He's at least going to be J.D. Bertrand. He's at least going to be, those type of players. And it really seems to me that Marcus Freeman and his staff at all positions are focusing more and more and more on the ceiling. And that's why you look at Gobira, Tyson Ford, Snead, Burnham, Ziegler, Benjamin Morrison. I mean, even Jaden Bellamy, who they like a lot more than I do. The whole discussion is what we think he can be. And that's a change, even on offense with Price and Merriweather and Raritan and Stace. They Emil Wagner at offensive line, right? Ty Chan on the offensive line, Ashton Craig on the offensive line. We're seeing a little bit on offense, but especially on defense, you're seeing upside being the focus. And I think that's smart. Now, if you can find a guy with a high ceiling and a high floor, that's Keon Keeley, that's Brendan Vernon, that's Malik Muhammad, that's Justin Rhett, that's Peyton Bowen. Obviously those are the guys you ultimately want. But the fact that they're focusing on, like, if you're going to take a chance on a Picciotti, I said to a friend like this, Ryan, you tell me if you agree. Phil Picciotti today, as of February 11th, is a better player than Preston Zinter, in my opinion.
No argument.
In 2 years, if they both reach their full potential, I think Preston Zinter is a better football player than Phil Picciotti. That's kind of how I look at it, and that's how I think the Notre Dame staff looks at it.
Yeah, no, I definitely I subscribe to that line of thinking because, again, Preston's been asked to do a lot more for his high school than, like you mentioned, Phil Bacciatti. Phil Bacciatti is a downhill, explosive, long kid, right? Like that's what he does. But Preston Zinter in the system is asked to cover slot receivers, play over tight ends, play stacked positions, do a lot of different things, rush off the edge. So he's shown the ability to kind of affect the game in multiple ways. So that toolbox, I think the upside is substantial. And I also think, Brian, that, when we're talking about, going for upside a little bit, I think that shows absolute trust in your coaching staff that you can get those guys to a certain point, right? Like, I feel like sometimes if you go to the floor, that's just saying like, we're hesitant on our development a little bit. And I'm not taking a shot at Coach Kelly or, if that was the line of thinking, but I just think that when you do subscribe to, hey, we're going to take a little bit of a gamble on some upside at times, but we think we can capitalize because we have trust in our coaching staff. I think that speaks volumes, and I'm excited for that line of thinking. And I think that, I think that we're seeing some evidence of it. And I mean, we'll see how it works out, but I really do like that they have obviously they have some confidence in their coaching abilities right now, I would say.
Right. And yeah, that's exactly right. I think a lot of it has to do with their coaching ability, but also Matt Bayless. I think that's a big part of it too.
Development in general. Yep.
Yeah, you give them a guy like this and he's going to blow up. And I think to your point, I mean, you saw him sitting next to his dad. His dad does not appear to be a very small guy, right?
No.
And his older brother's 6'6", 300 plus pounds. I mean, this kid's got another growth spurt and he's already hit one. I'm telling you, this kid grew at least an inch since the last time Notre Dame saw him. I'm just telling you by looking at his junior film and just hearing some of the things that were said about him before. It was like, we really like him, but well, the but got negated the last time they met him because he was bigger. He was just, I'm telling you, go look at the picture on the front page of irishbreakdown.com and you'll see what I'm talking about. Like this kid got bigger. And I think that was the straw for Notre Dame is they always loved how he moved. And it's about, okay, now he's got the size and the length to match that. And I think that's what they were looking for.
You remember a few weeks ago when I texted you about Zinter, right? And I was asking what you thought what his height was, because I thought he was 6'2",
Right.
And then like you said, you see the recent photos and you're like, oh, okay, this kid looks like he may have sprouted a little bit. So
right. If he's 6'2", Marcus Freeman has shrunk.
Right.
Exactly. You know what I mean? Like
exactly.
to put it into perspective, like his nose is at the top of Marcus Freeman's forehead. I mean, like if you look at that, I'm looking at that picture now at irishbreakdown.com, but they like the kid. So, I think if you want to disagree with this commitment, I think what I is get off of the discussion of they should have waited. They rushed into this one, all those type of things. What I'm just telling you right now, this was the thing where somebody said to me on the message board, there's a lot of big time linebackers on the board. Why shouldn't they have waited on one of those guys? And my response was because they think he is one of those guys, right? This was not we have to fill spots. Notre Dame could have got away with only 2 linebackers in this class. They knew that, right? Mm-hmm. But there's a reason they took this kid because they view him. So I think the discussion needs to move away from, the timing of it. Should they have taken him now? Should they have waited? And get into, okay, do you agree with their evaluation of him or not? Because that's where this comes down to. They did not take him because they felt a need to take him to fill a spot or, we're going to get left out in the cold. Trust me, Marcus Freeman has enough confidence in himself as a recruiter that he's not going to be afraid to go down to Texas and battle for Anthony Hill or down to Louisiana and battle for Jaden Ausberry or down to Florida and battle for Troy Bowles. Trust me, he thinks he can get those guys, and he hasn't even hired his linebackers coach yet. Right? And so this is about, they think this kid can really play. And so now if you could, I think it's debatable for that. Cause what we don't do here, we don't do the whole, just trust the coaches thing here. Right? Like coaches make mistakes, right? And this is a place where we're allowed to have those conversations. So if you don't think the kid can play, you're welcome to voice that opinion. But all I'm simply saying is, let's not focus on the timing aspect of it because they don't view this as that. They think this kid is a top linebacker. That's where the conversation should be, is whether or not they are correct or not about that. And I think that would be a bigger conversation to have. And I think that's where we can do it. And I'll have you answer this question, Ryan. Bronx ND fan. I haven't seen you chat in the chat for a while, Bronx ND fan. So good to see you posting in this one. It says, what's the kid's upside potential from a physical perspective, speed, strength, and weight?
Well, I would say, so he's right now right about 6'3". I would say, and let me know if you disagree with this, Brian. I would say 230, 235, he could play at pretty easily, I think, right? Like, I don't know if it's going to go much more than that. But he definitely has, I mean, right now he's about 215, 220. So there's still a substantial weight gain that's going to happen. I think speed-wise, I think I would call him more flexible than I would call him straight line fast, if that makes sense. Like, I think his straight line speed is good. It's sufficient. But I think the thing that he does well is I think he does navigate space pretty well. And I think he actually does move laterally pretty well and kind of redirect in space. Strength wise, physical.
That right there is the difference between him and Pachotti, in my opinion.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think Pachotti's a little bit more explosive downhill in a short area. Like short area, like step to power is a little bit better. I think Zinter has more open. I mean, there's some clips where you'll see him catch a pass and take off running, and you're like, okay, this kid's got some speed, right?
Yeah.
But I think the thing you talked about, and this is very important for a linebacker, is the change of direction, the lateral quickness, those things, the balance, the agility. I think those things are better with Zinter than Pachotti. And I think it's, look, they viewed both of them as really good football players. If they're going to err on the side of who to take, they're going to take the guy with the higher ceiling and the better athlete. And I think there's no doubt, in my opinion, that Zinter's the better athlete. We'll find out if he's the better football player, because as I said, I think we both agree that right now, today, if I'm starting a high school football team, based on what we saw from junior film, Phil Pachotti's a better Mike linebacker than Preston Zinter, mainly because Preston Zinter doesn't play Mike linebacker.
That's what I was going to say. Is it's a projection, right? Like they like him at Mike. He doesn't even play Mike for his own school. He plays outside linebacker in a 3-4. He's playing on the ball a ton. He's playing out in space. So it is a projection. But I think when you just kind of see the skill set he has, they think that it parlays to a good Mike linebacker. And I don't disagree. I think when you kind of when you kind of put everything in a row, right, and you just kind of think about the intangibles that make a good Mike linebacker, I think that Zinter has all those tools, and I think the projection makes a lot of sense.
So Ryan, let's dive into a little bit of film here, and let's take a look at. We are joined by my man Vince D'Addario. Vince, you can go ahead and get a swig, buddy. No, all good. We're going to dive into some film here of this young man.
Excellent.
And we'll see. And then what you guys are going to see is, how's the color on that? Look good?
Beautiful.
Yep,
okay, because I still have the same problem I had the other day, Vince.
Oh, okay.
All right, so let's dive into some film here. This is Preston Zinter for Lawrence Central Catholic. You guys go ahead and take it away. So, okay, this connection today is not being very friendly with me. Give me a second, folks.
No problem.
Take your time.
So, Vince, you have some thoughts you want to share about Preston Zinter here?
No, I'm excited. I think we kind of anticipated this, and obviously that's a good thing. But I'm excited about him. I think it just adds to this linebacker. Can we call it linebacker U yet? At least for a couple years here. I mean, I'm enjoying what Marcus Freeman is doing at linebacker. That's for darn sure. And obviously hoping that his Midas touch can spread out to the rest of the team. And but I'm really excited about this kid. I think this kid is a dynamic playmaker, and excited that he's going to be part of the 23 class for sure. No question about that.
Yeah. And Brian, I know why you're getting that up. I know Chris asked, does he still play tight end? Yes, he still is a two-way guy for Central Catholic there.
He plays some receiver as well. He's not just, I mean,
they split him out.
You'll see his first highlight film is him playing outside as more of a wide receiver than a tight end. So let's see if this works now. Get this going. All
Technology is beautiful when it works, everybody.
I know. See, it froze again. So I don't know what the heck is going on. There's clearly something going on my end. So I apologize.
You want me to see if I can get it on my end?
Yeah. Well, do you have a second monitor that you can use to bring it up on? Yes, that's the problem.
You're hilarious.
Yeah, I know, right?
I can bring up a different tab, but yeah.
Vince, you don't have it in with a tech guy at your school?
I'm gonna have to step. I mean, look, I brought the flag into the teacher's lounge. I mean, it's one step at a time here.
So this is why so we can kind of share a little bit of why I'm sort of excited, Vince. Vince and I had a little interaction last night where it was like 9:30, and I texted Vince and I said, "Hey, man, I'm really excited." And he said, why? I said, well, you got to jump into this chat that this stream that I started. And so we got into the stream and I showed him the new one that we have. We've been trying for months to try to be able to do some film breakdowns and things like that. And what was happening was we couldn't connect it to, like when we would connect it, we would just drop out. And I've had issues with stream with me. Even now I'm dropping out right now. And what was happening was I just had an older version of my iMac. And so it wouldn't connect with like modern stuff. Well, my new iMac arrived this week. I got it set up last night. We ran a test and it went swimmingly. So it's not quite fully set up yet, which is why I'm not doing today's stream from
I was wondering, yeah.
But I'm really getting ready to just say screw this and just switch the computers out real quick and jump in here because I'm really getting annoyed that I can't watch this film. So
I know, right?
Actually, I think
it's still spinning. So
yeah, it is. So it is what it is. So we're not going to have film of Preston Zinter for some ungodly reason. That is just deciding not to work. So why don't you guys go ahead and answer some questions about Preston Zinter? I'm going to check out of here and see if I can get this switched over.
Okay.
And then we'll go from there. All right.
Sounds good, brother, man.
Yep.
Okay, let's see what we got. Okay, the starred one is for the mailbag.
I think too, while we're kind of waiting, Ryan, I think maybe you could kind of chat about sort of what's next for Notre Dame, and I think obviously sure. As you look at this, I think they'll take a third inside linebacker. I think they would if it's the right guy. But I think the focus right now is probably going to be on guys that could play Rover or Will. Obviously, Drake Bowen could play Rover or Will. So I think there's another guy like that. So that's, I think, kind of the conversation and just who you think some top guys are that they should look at.
Yeah, no, we can do that for sure. So kind of going off of that pathway, and then we'll maybe go into if there's any questions in the chat. So like Brian said, I thought the number was probably 2, but apparently, there is a potential need for a third linebacker. And I think that because we're talking obviously about Preston Zinter, who is much more the Mike, structurally, right?
Like he's an inside guy. Yeah.
Yep. He's a pure inside guy. The staff does think that he can play Will as well, but either way, he's going to be an inside linebacker in this system. Drake Bowen, who I already had a commit from out of Indiana, the in-state kid, he of course is more. He's a Will preferred for me, but also we've talked about the layer that he is going to play baseball at Notre Dame as well. So how much weight is he going to gain, right? Like he might keep his weight around that 215 to 220 range. So he could potentially be a Rover in that system. So finding another guy that kind of fits a similar mold, I think Rover Will would be an interesting conversation. I know Sam Mpemba down there at IMG Academy is a kid that everyone is extremely excited about. He's 6'4", 230, but he plays a lot in space already, and he would be a very odd body type for a Rover. But if you get a player like him, maybe he's your Will. Drake Bowen goes over to Rover, and you kind of get 3 very different body types and 3 exciting comparative to one another type of players. Jaden Osbury is one that Brian talked about a little bit down there in Louisiana. He is like a pure Will type of player. He's 6 foot, right around 205 pounds. So he's not, comparatively speaking, the biggest linebacker, obviously. But what he is he's a true run and chase Will, extremely explosive, a lot more physical than you would expect for a guy his size as well. So I think that he would be an interesting fit, especially if their outlook eventually is Drake Bowen can be a Rover if his weight gain is not going to be quite what we think it is. But if it is to the point where he can get up to 225, 230, I think Drake Bowen is ultimately the Will. So
okay.
There's a couple guys that are on the board. Yeah.
Okay, we got a couple questions about Preston. So here we go. Bronx ND fan, how's the competition that he plays against? No, he plays in Massachusetts, I believe.
Yes.
So you can speak to the competition probably a little better than I can.
Yeah. No. So it's good competition comparative to what Massachusetts plays, right? Traditionally, and I put out a article this morning, and I think that everyone should just go take a look at it. I talked historically speaking, the talent that has come out of the state of Massachusetts, and this year specifically, we're talking about, obviously, Preston Zinter is already in the class. They still are high on Ronan Hannafin, who's the wide receiver, could play defensive back, also on defense. And we, of course, Samuel Akulola, who is a 5-star offensive tackle out of the state of Massachusetts as well. So they are heavy. I mean, right now, you got to feel good about where they are with Ronan Hannafin. And then, of course, Coach Heastan and the staff is making a big push for Samuel Okulola. So this could be a tremendous year in the state of Massachusetts. And I went back and I did a lot of research. Preston Zinter is just the 7th player from the state of Massachusetts to sign with Notre Dame in the last 25 years. So it is, and they have never had more than one player sign in a single class from the state of Massachusetts.
And they're on 3, you said.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. It could be a huge year. Yes.
I think that number's 8 because the guy that you left out of your article is Barry Gallup.
Barry Gallup.
I understand why you left him out of your article.
Why is that?
Because he wasn't very good. And his dad was the AD at BC at the time. But yeah, so it was one of those like, oh yeah, was he a walk-on? I'm sorry. I'm still working on this, but I just had to jump in and say that because I just love talking about Barry Gallup. Those weird Charlie White
Barry Gallup.
I just like mentioning the name. And how often
I remember the kid.
How often do I get a chance to bring up Barry Gallup in a conversation?
Not often.
You know? So like when I get to do it, I gotta take full advantage. I gotta take full advantage. Sorry.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness gracious.
That's all right. So to be corrected, 8 players in the last 25 years. Sorry. But still, either way, still only one that they've never signed more than one player from the state of Massachusetts. And this year, Massachusetts, in the first time in 24/7 sports history, they have a 5-star recruit in Samson Okulola. So it is a rich year for, I mean, there's a safety also, I forget his name, that's in Massachusetts this year. That's a heavy lean towards Georgia right now. So they have some talent in the state of Massachusetts this year, which is super interesting. And I never thought I would come into my first cycle where winning the state of Massachusetts is such a big thing for Notre Dame this year, but it's pretty interesting to see. And I would go check out that article because, I mean, obviously last cycle 2022, they signed Ty Chan out of Massachusetts. Jay Brunel was a guy in 2020. Before that, the last guy was Justin Yoon in 2015. And before that, I think 2013 was John Metellus, who was a guard, switched to defensive tackle. He ended up transferring. And then before that, there was like 2 guys in the 2000s. So it's not been a history of great recruiting wins or, big recruiting time presence in Massachusetts for obvious reasons, right? Like there's not usually a ton of great talent, but there have been, of course, through the years, guys like A.J. Dillon, the Lindstrom brothers, like there's Hunter Long, Pat Fryermuth. There's still been guys. And I just find it really interesting that one of the priority states this year, at least comparative to what they usually produce in talent, Notre Dame is in Massachusetts this year.
I'm going to give this a try, guys. Let's see if this works. So just give me a second here. All right. Is it full screen now?
Except for the 3 of us. Yes.
Yes. Okay, perfect. So let's get rolling. All right.
Looks promising.
Yeah. So this is a linebacker. That's the play I was talking about. Like that's a line. That kid he can move now. Like you know what I mean? Like he can move. And this is what he does most. And Ryan, this is what you're talking about, kind of that stand-up edge rusher kind of guy. Like the hands there. It's a big kid he's going against.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what they're feeding kids in Massachusetts or whatever it is, but like
this year,
maybe they got some new additions into the the clam chowder or something like that up there in New England. I don't know what's going on, but it is interesting. I mean, you talked about Ryan. You talked about 8 guys in 20 years. Well, they're going to have 5, and if they were to hit home runs in this class with Okulola and Ronan Hannafin, you'd have 5 in the last 4 years.
Yep,
which is again, it's like. If you'd have told me that a few years ago, I'm like, oh man, that's not good. Notre Dame's adding a bunch of kids from Massachusetts. This is not going to go well. But these kids can play. I love the dip and rip here.
Mm-hmm.
This is a really impressive play. Look at the quickness, Ryan. This is the other thing I wanted to show.
I think. And obviously, we're watching this on offense, so it's, what does it look like on defense, right? But you can see the quick feet here that will translate to playing in space a little bit.
We'll eventually see it.
Yeah.
It was rolling so well.
Yeah, it was. It was going there for a while, and then it decided
not to. Yeah.
So I'm very annoyed right now.
He moves well for a big
Yes.
man. I can tell you that much.
Yes, he does.
Yeah.
Yep.